let's talk about sports movies. I'm not talking about whether you like sports or even whether you follow the rules of whatever game is being played. I'm talking about the stories, the arcs, the tropes, the structure. Because when you look closely, most sports movies are built from the same parts. There are a lot of sports movies out there, a lot of stories that have been told, but most of them can generally be sorted into one of 5 categories. First, there's the story we'll call Against All Odds. These are movies about an individual or team that performs way above expectations. Your traditional underdog stories, where success is found in the most unexpected circumstances. Think Rocky, Miracle, Cool Runnings, Dodgeball, The Mighty Ducks, all fall into this category. Next, there's The Last Hurrah. Stories about once great athletes or teams who've fallen from grace or are past their primes and are now mounting one final run. A last push at greatness where they give everything they have left. These are movies like For Love of the Game, the recent F1, Rocky Balboa, or Creed 3. Third, we have The Grinder, a character who dedicates themselves to mastering a craft even when they're told they'll never be good enough. This is Rudy, Greater, or most of the Rocky sequels. There's The Savant, about people who clearly have the talent to succeed, but face major external obstacles that threaten to derail their success. In this category, we have movies like The Express, Race, The Blind Side, and The Natural. And finally, there's The Rivalry, a growing conflict between 2 athletes or teams that boils over into a dramatic climax. This is where we find movies like Warrior, Challengers, or Rush. Some films, like Moneyball for example, blend these categories, telling multiple arcs at once. And they're all the better for it. I personally think Moneyball is one of the great sports movies ever made. But even then, the source of conflict in a movie like Moneyball still tends to come from the outside. A system that won't recognize talent, a physical limitation, an under-resourced team, a rival, a loss. What you rarely see in sports movies is a story where the biggest thing standing in the main character's way is the main character. That's where Rounders comes in. Rounders isn't usually thought of as a sports movie. After all, it's about poker, which arguably isn't even a sport. It came out in 1998, directed by John Dahl, and didn't make a huge splash at the time of its release. The reviews were mixed. The legacy, for most people, starts and ends with John Malkovich's absurdly thick Russian accent.
Very aggressive.
And what's easy to miss is just how deliberately structured this film is. How it sets up something that looks like a standard sports arc, only to flip it into something much more unique. Because unlike almost every sports movie out there, Rounders doesn't really give its protagonist an external obstacle to overcome. It doesn't say, look what he could accomplish if only they'd give him a chance. Instead, it asks, what if he already has everything he needs and he still blows it? The most important thing to understand about Rounders is that what it presents to us at a surface level for a plot is not actually the story it's trying to tell. I'm sure many people, critics included, left this movie thinking it's a typical redemption arc that builds towards the ultimate villain, Malkovich's Teddy KGB. But you see, Teddy KGB is not actually the main villain of this movie. No, the protagonist and the antagonist are the same person. Mike McDermott, played by Matt Damon, is not an underdog. He's not washed up, he's not being held back by the system. He's talented, probably the best poker player we see across the film. The problem is, he knows it. And he believes that his talent means he doesn't need to be disciplined, that he doesn't need to learn, that he's already got it all figured out. And the entire film, from start to finish, is about watching him trying to unlearn that mindset. The story of Rounders is broken into 3 chapters. Chapter 1 introduces Mike at the height of his confidence. He's riding a hot streak up over $20,000, convinced that he wins because of pure skill alone. He doesn't just think he's better than everyone else, he is sure of it. He even brags that he can win a hand of poker without seeing anyone's cards, including his own. So he walks into a game with Teddy KGB, a mob-backed underground poker boss, and goes all in on a trap he thinks he has brilliantly set. And then he gets completely outplayed. Caught up in his own arrogance, Mike bets it all, and he loses everything. And then, amidst this humiliation, we fade to black. It's a story beat that would normally happen at the midpoint of a movie like this. Here, it's just the end of the first chapter. Chapter 2 picks up after some time. Mike has left poker behind, turning his focus to law school and the life he is trying to build with his girlfriend. And as he leaves the intensity of the game behind, Mike's true talent finally begins to shine through. At the beginning of Chapter 2, Mike stumbles into a judge's poker game with no intention to participate. No corruptible motives beyond simply watching the game that he loves. And in this moment, with no ego in the way, Mike proves just how good of a player he can be.
Okay. Well, you were looking for that third 3, but you forgot that Professor Green folded it on 4th Street, and now you're representing that you have it. The DA made his 2-pair, but he knows they're no good. Judge Kaplan was trying to squeeze out a diamond flush, but he came up short, and Mr. Eisen is futilely hoping that his queens are going to stand up. So, like I said, the dean's bet is $20.
He reads everybody's hands flawlessly just for the fun of it, and then he leaves. The audience now understands Mike's potential if he can just get out of his own way. But then Worm, an old friend newly released from prison, shows up and drags Mike back into his old ways. It becomes clear pretty quickly that Worm isn't just a bad influence. He's a stand-in for Mike's own worst instincts. His ego personified. His overconfidence creeping back in and once again altering the outcome of his performance. When Worm's not at the table, Mike wins. He lets the game come to him and flexes his superior talent. But when Worm returns, everything collapses. When he returns, Mike recognizes his own superiority. Through Worm, we realize Mike hasn't actually changed. He's just pretending that he has. Even outside poker, we see it. He skips school obligations, thinking he'll be fine. He isn't. He embarrasses himself in front of influential judges, loses all respect from his girlfriend and classmates, and ultimately decides to drop out of law school. He keeps sabotaging himself, and in the end, we realize it's no one's fault but his own. Eventually, this finally catches up to Mike. He realizes that all of this, the debt, the danger, the failure, the embarrassment, isn't because the world is against him. It's because he can't get out of his own way. So he cuts ties with Worm, and Chapter 2 comes to an end. Chapter 3 is the rematch. Mike sits across from Teddy KGB once again, just like the beginning of the movie. But this time, there's no bravado, no arrogance, just focus. The technical stakes are clear. He has to win back enough money to pay off his debts before morning. But the emotional stakes are much bigger. The question isn't, can Mike win? You know as soon as he sits down that he can, and he probably should. The question instead becomes, can Mike finally play the game without self-destructing? Chapter 3 acts as its own short film that sums up everything we've seen before. We watch Mike battle with his own arrogance throughout the contest. He initially wipes the floor with Teddy, letting his superior talents speak for themselves. And just as he has earned enough to walk away square with the mob, his ego is challenged. Teddy KGB brags about the last time Mike was actually outplayed at a poker table.
Still up 20 grand from this last time I stick it in you.
So, instead of walking away having accomplished his goals, Mike sits back down, his ego once again invading his thoughts, and he begins to self-destruct. We fade further into the night and watch Mike's chips dwindle as he once again gets in his own way. And then, as he faces the same outcome as Chapter 1, he catches himself. He realizes that he is in control of his own fate. That it has not been Teddy KGB beating him, but in fact Mike beating himself. For the first time, Mike recognizes his true path to success. He doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. He just has to play the game that he loves and enjoy doing it. And that's enough. What's so satisfying about Rounders, and what makes it so different from most sports movies, is that we're not really rooting for Mike to win the big game. Yes, it is a satisfying outcome to watch him win, but not because we feel like this is his ultimate fight. Instead, we're rooting for Mike to get out of his own way. Most sports movies put the blame somewhere else. It's the coach, the institution, the injury, the generally superior competition. Rounders strips all of that away. It forces the audience to sit with a more uncomfortable question. What if this actually is your fault? And because it does that, the ending doesn't feel like the conclusion to a redemption arc. It feels like the starting line. The moment when Mike finally understands what it's going to take to actually go the distance. It's not a finish line, it's a beginning. Rounders isn't flashy. It's not inspirational in the traditional sense. It doesn't ask you to cheer for the hero because he overcame the odds. It asks you to root for someone to stop getting in their own way, and to finally live up to the potential they've had the whole time. And in doing that, it flips the script on what a sports movie can be. Not a story about beating someone else, but a story about finally beating yourself.